Hi, my name is Melissa Wasser. I'm a senior policy counsel at the ACLU of DC, and I'm here to tell you how a bill becomes a law at the DC Council. So how do most bills become a law in DC? Step 1, an idea. Council members, the mayor, and the DC Attorney General can all introduce bills, albeit via slightly different processes. Step 2, introduce the bill and refer it to a committee. A bill is formally introduced in the Committee of the Whole, which is a committee made up of all council members. It's also known as the COW, at a legislative meeting or with little fanfare in the office of the secretary. It is then referred to the relevant committee, like the Committee on the Judiciary and Public Safety or the Committee on Health. The committee can either choose not to take up the bill at all or to schedule a hearing at which residents, businesses, and government representatives can share their thoughts on what has been proposed in the legislation. Step 3, have a hearing. After the hearing, for the bill to progress, it's scheduled for a markup, at which it may be amended and ultimately voted on by the committee members. An affirmative vote in the committee will then send the bill to the Committee of the Whole. Step 4, let's get technical and have a first vote. At this point, a technical process point intervenes. The COW will verify each bill has met the necessary paperwork, fiscal impact, and legal sufficiency hurdles. They'll then vote to place the bill on the agenda for the next legislative meeting. At that meeting, the full council, in another guise, debates, possibly amends, and ultimately votes on the bill. Step 5, second vote time. Voting twice on bills is a required part of the DC Council legislative process. If the Council approves a bill in a first vote, the bill as passed is called the engrossed version. It's then put on the agenda for a legislative meeting at least 14 days later. Between those two legislative meetings, the text of the legislation may be modified somewhat. The full Council then debates, possibly amends, and ultimately votes on the legislation for a second time. The version of the bill approved in the second council vote is called the enrolled version. Step 6, mayor time. The bill goes to the mayor, and unless the mayor vetoes it, this bill has been enacted. The council can override a veto with a 2/3 vote. Step 7, all aboard for Congress. Once the district government is done with a piece of legislation, it's then transmitted to the US Congress. After 30 congressional working days, which is far more than 30 business days because of Congress's frequent recesses, or 60 congressional working days for criminal matters, the bill will become law unless both houses of Congress have passed and the president has signed a joint resolution disapproving the act. So what's the difference between emergency, temporary, and permanent legislation in DC? Emergency legislation is in effect for up to 90 days. It bypasses committee and COW processes. It cannot have an unfunded cost. There's no hearing required. There's only a single vote by the council required, and there's no congressional review for emergency legislation. For temporary legislation, it's in effect for up to 225 days. It bypasses committee and COW processes. It's subject to congressional review. It cannot have an unfunded cost. For permanent legislation, when passed, it's in effect permanently. It's subject to committee and COW processes. It's subject to congressional review. It's subject to funding. And it's required to receive 2 simple majority votes by the full council and required to go through congressional review. Now, do all types of legislation go through congressional review? No. Only temporary and permanent legislation at the council goes through congressional review. Only emergency legislation does not go through congressional review. Can I submit testimony on a bill that has already had a hearing? Yes, as long as the hearing record is still open. You can go on the Legislative Information Management System, or LIMS, at lims.dccouncil.gov to search a bill and see if the hearing record is still open and submit your written testimony. How do I ask my council member to hold a hearing on a bill that I want to support? You can go to the council website at dccouncil.gov and find a member of council's contact information to contact them and ask them to hold a hearing on a bill that you support. So what is the congressional review process? Because DC is considered a federal district and not a state, Congress, where district residents have no voting representation, and the president have the legal ability to micromanage local laws and local tax dollars. All local DC bills have to go through a congressional review period before they become law. The review period is 30 congressional working days for civil bills and 60 congressional working days for criminal bills. Here's how that process works. Step 1. Elected DC council members vote to pass a bill. Step 2. The bill goes to the mayor, and if the mayor doesn't veto it, the bill passes. If the mayor does veto it, the DC Council can vote to override that veto and pass the bill with a 2/3 majority vote. Now, this is normally when a bill becomes a law in a state, but DC bills go through several more steps. Step 3. At this point, the local bill has to go to Congress for review. That means that members of Congress, none of whom DC residents ever elected, can either let that review period pass without interference or disapprove of the bill. Step 4. If Congress lets the review period pass, the bill becomes law. But if Congress disapproves the bill by passing a joint disapproval resolution in both the House and the Senate, the bill moves on to the next step. Step 5. The disapproval resolution then heads to the president, who can then veto the disapproval or sign it and thus overturn the local law. Now, what is a disapproval resolution? Under the Home Rule Act, any member of the House or the Senate may introduce a qualifying joint resolution disapproving a DC law anytime after the law has been submitted to Congress. A disapproval resolution, if passed, would nullify the DC law and treat it as if it has never been passed. A disapproval resolution must be passed within 30 days or 60 days if it's criminal legislation of the legislation being transmitted to Congress. Both the House and the Senate must pass the disapproval resolution, and the president must sign the disapproval resolution for it to become law. If the president vetoes the disapproval resolution, Congress must override the veto with a 2/3 vote in both chambers. When Congress has a hearing on a bill, does that mean that the bill has passed that committee? No. Having a hearing on a bill is different from passing that bill out of a committee. Although a hearing has taken place, a vote would need to take place after the hearing to pass that bill out of the committee. Who represents DC residents in Congress? And what committees have oversight over DC? Although DC has a larger population than some states, the district is not a state, so it has a delegate with limited voting privileges. DC has an at-large delegate in the House of Representatives. Delegates enjoy powers, rights, and responsibilities identical in most respects to those of House members from the states. While delegates can speak, introduce bills and resolutions, and offer amendments on the House floor, they cannot vote in House floor sessions or preside over them. There are also two key committees that have oversight over Washington, D.C. In the House, there is the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, more commonly known as House Oversight, and the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, more commonly known as HISGAC. HISGAC also has a subcommittee on disaster management, the District of Columbia, and census that oversees DC. What is the Home Rule Act and why is it so important? The DC Home Rule Act of 1973 allowed DC residents to elect the mayor, DC council members, and advisory neighborhood commissioners who run day-to-day affairs in the district. The DC Home Rule Act also established a process for Congress to review and disapprove of most laws enacted by DC before they take effect. Before Congress passed and President Nixon signed the DC Home Rule Act of 1973 into law, federally appointed commissioners and members of Congress, never elected by DC residents, shared the responsibility of running the district's local laws and budget. Congressional offices fielded calls about DC's potholes, trash pickup, schools, and crime, in addition to all of the calls they were getting from their constituents back in their home states. The DC Home Rule Act of 1973 ultimately passed as a compromise between DC residents who wanted full democratic rights and members of Congress who wanted to maintain power over DC and its majority Black population. The law allowed DC residents to elect a local government that would oversee the day-to-day functioning of the district, while Congress maintained power over local laws, the local budget, and other matters. Now, history from before the Home Rule era suggests that Congress actually struggled to manage DC, and that members of Congress were regularly reminded of their responsibility by DC residents who demanded improvements. By 1973, after nearly 100 years of trying to manage local affairs, many members of Congress were quite eager to give up this responsibility, even those who had wanted to maintain power over the majority Black district. What is an executive order, and how much power does it have? An executive order is an order by the President directing the U.S. government to take actions calculated to ensure the faithful execution of law. An executive order cannot override a federal statute or the U.S. Constitution. Executive orders direct federal agencies, not local governments directly. They cannot dictate how the local DC government must act, and they cannot change DC laws. However, executive orders can direct federal agencies to act in ways that impact the local DC government, as well as other stakeholders of local government. For example, an executive order that directs a federal agency to withdraw funding for certain types of work can impact the local government if it has a contract with that federal agency for work that is subject to the executive order. Executive orders, therefore, while potentially impactful, do not repeal, modify, or otherwise alter local DC law. Why is statehood important for the people of DC? The nearly 700,000 residents of DC want our full voting rights, control over our own tax dollars, and the ability to govern ourselves. DC is currently considered a federal district, and because DC is not a state, the federal government is legally allowed to intervene in our lives. Members of Congress can repeal our laws and dictate how we in DC spend our own tax dollars. Statehood is constitutional, and granting DC statehood would not require any new constitutional amendments. It just requires that Congress and the President to pass a law. District residents need our friends and family in other states to pressure their representatives and senators to make DC the 51st state. Congress and the President must pass H.R. 51 and S. 51, the Washington, D.C. Admission Act, to make DC the 51st state. Denying full voting rights to the 700,000 residents of DC, the majority of whom are Black and brown, is an egregious example of voter suppression happening in our country today. We also deserve to have a say in what happens in our country. Making DC a state would add 2 senators and 1 representative to Congress who could represent our values and advance our needs. We are veterans, nurses, grocery store clerks, teachers, restaurant workers, volunteers, family members, and neighbors, and we deserve to govern ourselves. What happens in the DC Council and in Congress directly affects the rights and voices of everyone who calls DC home. To learn more about how you can stay informed and take action, Visit our website at acludc.org.